baby. You listening to the Bowel Movement.
Welcome to the Powell Movement. I'm your host, Mike Powell, and this week, for the first time in 6 months, life has started to feel normal for me and my family. No, we aren't the people that you see partying without masks, we are not crammed on packed beaches, and we aren't going to indoor restaurants. We are still doing what we can to not get and be spreaders of the virus. We have been on the extra safe side throughout this whole thing. We haven't lived in fear. Okay, maybe we lived in fear the first couple of months, but after that, we had a couple social distance get-togethers back when everyone thought it was cool to start doing that, and when we started to see the numbers start ramping up, we decided to reel our shit back in. We don't want to get this virus or spread it to anyone, and we felt this way since February. And I guess doing what we're doing, minimizing contact with people, is the easiest way not to get it. But it's not normal. We feel like prisoners in our own home. And while we do go to the forest and get in the water a lot, life is not normal. So we did a 2-week quarantine with another family that we're close with, and now we have someone to hang out with. My kid has his best friend back, sleepovers are a thing again, and we're going to go on vacation. We got an Airbnb, and it'll make summer feel a little bit more normal. In life, we take so many things for granted, and when things are taken away, that's when we find out what our new normal is, and that can be scary, or boring. No one knows this better than my guest this week, Paul Basagoitia. While Paul's childhood was anything but normal, his overnight success on his bike changed life for him. He was a pro biker, and being a pro means risk. And an accident at what could have been the peak moment of Paul's career created the hardest new normal that he's had to face yet. It's an incredible story, and before we get into the podcast, I need to let you know an incredible story of mine. I am done with competitive drinking. The challenge is now over, and I am not your champion. Congrats to Chad Bryant, a college roommate of mine, who defeated me in the championship match. That means I finished this year at 31-3 with a 91% winning percentage. That's pretty good. I'm sure glad these challenges are over, but I'll bring them back next year if there is interest. I also want to thank 10 Barrel and Stanley, not only for sponsoring the podcast, but for giving me some amazing prizing for this contest and some tasty beer to drink. I also need to thank Traeger for sending me the best grill on the planet. I use it 3 times a week, and if you don't have one, well, your barbecue is not as good as mine. Finally, I want to ask you to subscribe to the podcast, tell a friend to listen, and if you're at a brand, times are tough over here at the Powell Movement sponsor-wise. And while I'm kind of picky, I'm proven to drive sales and awareness. Starting the conversation is easy. My email is mike@thepowellmovement.com, and I will get back to you. At this point, you've heard enough from me. Now it's time to jump into someone way more interesting and talk to Paul Basagoitia. Well, thank you for making some time. I know we talked about doing this podcast back when your movie was coming out, probably about over a year ago, but life for you has been really busy. You've had movie premieres. You've probably been shredding on your e-bike a ton. What's been going on in the past year?
Oh, exactly what you said, man. Last year was probably the busiest year I've ever had in my whole career or my life. And we worked on any one of us for 4 years, and we finally got to release it last year. So last year, we just focused on basically hitting up all the movie premieres all around the U.S. And we closed a big deal with HBO. So it was pretty cool to see this all come together. And I'm very happy how the film came about, and happy to be finished with it and move on.
Yeah, it's definitely a heavy movie from a ton of different perspectives. Gives you a good look behind the curtain. You know, a little bit of what you can see and not understand what goes on with someone who has a life-altering injury. So heavy movie and really, really well done. But funny that you say that it's the busiest year of your entire life, because looking through your life and times, there are years when you're in Scotland, Brazil, Germany, contests everywhere, and last year's the busiest year of your life?
It was, man. You know, I took a big role in that film. You know, I shot a lot of it. I came in as an executive producer. I was there in the edit bay. I was traveling from Reno to Santa Monica to the Red Bull HQ, I think every other week. It was a very busy year, man, and I'm happy to be over it. And everyone's complaining about this COVID situation, what's happening right now. Oh, we can't travel, we can't go to these events. I'm like, I kind of like it kind of like being at home and riding, hanging out with friends, and just laying low.
Well, you've lived a life where you've spent a ton of time on airplanes and you've traveled the world and done so much. Not everybody has lived that life. So some people are bummed that they can't travel, but for you, who has over probably 2 million miles in the air, you're probably stoked.
Super stoked. And traveling is a little different these days. I'm not the biggest fan at airports. It's a mission for me to get around still. And, every time I have to go overseas or to somewhere that I know there's an airport that's hard to get around, I'm like, oh, I'm like dreading it, just knowing the facts that, I still have a lot of issues getting around, and I'd rather be home than traveling.
Yeah, I can imagine your situation creates another degree of difficulty that able-bodied people don't even think about. And then you get in your position and you realize, hey, this is a whole different ballgame, and not all the shit that I used to do is fun anymore. And we're going to talk about that throughout the podcast. But we'll get into your life and times, and I think everything starts for you in Minden, Nevada. You have 3 sisters, mom and dad together growing up in the beginning. What's your childhood like, the early years?
Yeah, I grew up in a small little town called Minden, Nevada, which is 30 minutes south from Reno, Nevada. And Minden was a cool little town. There wasn't really much going on, but for me, that was okay. Like, I was super private. I was on my own schedule. So, like, all I did growing up was riding my BMX bike around town, building jumps, just trying to make the best out of that whole little small town vibe.
And it sounds like when you're in Minden, your parents put you on a bike without training wheels when you're 2 years old. And I'm sure you don't remember that. But did your parents say you loved it?
They never said it, but I'm assuming I loved it, right? Because since then, I never got off the bike. So it's one of those things still today that I enjoy doing more than ever. I wake up, all I think about is riding or where I should go ride. And I'm very blessed to find something that I loved at such a young age. And regardless if it was a BMX bike, a mountain bike, or a motorcycle, anything on 2 wheels, I'm like the biggest fan.
You're born into it. From 2 years old on, you're on a bike, like you say. And the difference between you and most people that I podcasted with is that shit starts happening really, really early for you compared to anybody else. Like, you enter your first race at 6 or 7 years old and get third. Do you remember any of the early race days?
I do. I know that really clearly. And, exactly what you're saying. I started racing BMX at 6 years old at this track in Carson City, and we would go there every Sunday. My mom would drive me there every Sunday, and I would just race. I would just race against these other competitors, and I loved it. I loved it so much. I just loved the feeling of winning or not winning, just learning with your mistakes. And I was just looking forward to every weekend to go to the BMX track. And next thing you know, it wasn't just a local racetrack that we were going every Sunday. Next thing you know, we were going out of state. We were going to the East Coast. We were traveling all around the states, racing those BMX bikes and chasing all those points to try to get the national age group #1. And I ended up doing that at, I believe, 10 years old.
Yep, you were best in the world at age 10. But before we even get into you being the best in the world, being that you're put on a bike so early and that's all that you're doing, are there any other sports? Because most kids have a little bit of team sport stuff and they might realize they might not like it. With you, do you even have team sports, or do you realize biking is it from day one?
I try to branch out a little bit. I started playing football right around, I would say, early middle school. I started to play football and try to get into other sports. And I remember this every day, going to football practice. I would ride my bike to the football practice, do the whole, football drills and all that. All I was thinking was like, man, I can't wait to ride my bike back home. Like the whole football thing, like the whole school sports, the whole team sports was not really me. Like I was saying earlier, I was a very independent child. So I kind of just wanted to be in my own program, and I hate taking orders from others and being a whole team sport. It was just not really my vibe. And every football practice and every football game, I was just like so excited just to ride my bike back home.
So it validates that team sports are not for you. But you do get on a team and you do it super young. I think you're on a factory team at 8 years old. How does that even happen? And what does that mean for an 8-year-old kid?
Yeah, it's pretty wild. At the time, when you're 8 years old, like you really don't understand how big that is. But looking back, that was pretty cool, having support at 8 years old from a team that's paying for your airfares, paying for your bikes, paying for your food, and paying for you to go and enjoy your hobby. Man, that was so rad because I was on a team with so many badass athletes from TJ Lavin, X Game gold medalist. Brandon Meadows, he ended up winning the X Games as well. Like so many badass people on this team heard his hot shots, and looking back, I'm like, that was pretty cool because at the time I had no idea really who these guys were, and looking back, I'm like, that's pretty bitchin'.
So that team created some huge names and personalities in the bike world in a totally different aspect of biking years later, which is pretty crazy.
Yeah, super wild. The team was based out of Las Vegas, and it was just one guy, Nick Herda, that was running this whole program, and it was so cool to see like what he did for other athletes as well. And it's kind of cool looking back in those days, just traveling around in this crazy tour bus with all these other athletes, just living the kid's dream.
Yeah, I mean, you're traveling with legends at that time. They're just establishing themselves, but it's cool to have those relationships later on and doing it back then. Are you the youngest in that program by far?
Yes, at the time I definitely was. I think Lavin and those guys I think Lavin's like 10 years older than me. The crazy thing is like Lavin and I, we like chat all the time on social media, but like we never really like chatted when we were on the same team, because right when I got on the team, he signed with Specialized and he started in the X Games and started doing the whole dirt jump vibe. And I was so like still into racing, but he definitely motivated me to start learning how to do those tricks on the BMX bike and kind of like transition out of the racing scene.
Okay. And you're getting a lot of your travel paid for with the team, which is awesome. But is there a big expense to the family as well? Are they putting all their resources into your biking as they see a big opportunity for you?
Yeah, especially in the early days before the whole Hurt His Hot Shot program came along. My mom would take me all around the U.S. and my dad would mow lawns just to make sure I was able to get to those races. And, it was a very humbling experience. It's expensive. It's an expensive sport, not as expensive as moto and other sports, but, living in a small community, and my parents were definitely not the wealthiest people out there. So I was very grateful for them to go and sacrifice taking me to these races.
Yeah, and it sounds like the family business and the way that they're able to do this. Your dad's mowing lawns as well, but your family buys kind of a beat up motel that is the family business. I know you spend some time later on in the motel, but growing up, do you look at the motel as like home?
Yeah, I kind of do. And I still do today, which is weird. Like I actually drove down to Minden last weekend. It was my nephew's graduation. And I kind of just stopped and looked at it and just kind of like, it humbles me. It humbles me a lot. Just to kind of remember where I grew up and what my roots were. And yeah, last week I just pulled up in the parking lot and just had a little moment. I was sipping my coffee, looking at the place. I was like, gosh, man, like what a crazy situation that was. But at the same time, it was so awesome because, I had no responsibilities. I had some jumps in the back of the hotel. And, like at the time, I didn't think it was that big of a deal. But like being 33 years old now, I was like, man, holy crap, I can't believe I'd lived in a hotel room for 3 years.
Yeah, I mean, is it weird with like bringing friends over and saying I've got to go home and you're showing up at the hotel? Does that create a stigma at all?
I never did. That was the thing. I never invited friends over to my place, knowing the fact, where I was at. Even Zink was one of my best friends growing up, like from 15 years old, and he never knew I lived in a hotel room because it was one of those things I never like really wanted to discuss. I didn't think it was that big of a deal at the time either, right? Like all I wanted to do was ride a bike. Like the majority of my friends didn't give a shit where I lived or how I was raised. All they wanted to do was ride bikes.
Yeah. And is there a lot of pressure on you to do well on your bike since the family is putting a lot of money and time into it? And do they let you know that?
Definitely a lot of pressure for sure. I think my mom was way more competitive than I was at the time with this whole BMX racing thing. And yeah, it was one of those things, if I didn't do well, she would always kind of like yell at me. She would say, why are we doing this? Like, why am I spending my weekends to take you out to these bike races if you're not doing well? It was definitely a lot of pressure towards me as a child. And I think it was one of the main reasons why I got out of BMX racing as well. I kind of got burnt out. It wasn't fun. And I was like, man, this is not what I want to look forward to for the rest of my life.
Yeah, I would think it's embarrassing if you get fourth place and your mom is yelling at you at a race.
Yeah, it's a bit bizarre for sure. And, if I ever have kids, like I'm definitely going to learn from those mistakes that she did. First off, I'm never going to push them to ride a bike or whatever. But if they decide to, I'm definitely not going to ever, yell at them or push them or punish them if they ever do bad at a bike race.
And I hear you because it sounds like it sounds like a crazy existence where you're doing well and you've got this world that's awesome, but then you have your mom yelling at you, which makes you feel like shit, but you should still feel great because you're doing well. Does it ever make you hate racing?
Yeah, I was sick of it. Man, I would make excuses not to go to the races, like, oh, I'm not feeling good or I'm sick or whatever the situation was. But yeah, it's a bummer because, at first it was just a hobby. It was something I enjoyed doing with friends. And then, you start getting these factory rides. And the next thing you know, it's a whole different level of pressure. And yeah, it kind of burnt me out. I mean, not even just from like my mom's perspective, but like with the companies as well. It was too much.
What's your mentality? I mean, because in the free ride world, you want to see everybody land their run and do really well and see new tricks. But in the race world, do you just look over and want to kick everyone's ass?
Pretty much. Yeah. BMX racing is probably the most competitive sport there is. Still today, like I went to a BMX race last year and seeing the parents, the way they treat their kids brought some awful memories. I was like, holy shit, this shit still happens, and it's the same thing that's going on. My mom was not the only person, by the way, that was that type of person to punish their child if they didn't do well, like still today, there's families out there that are doing the same thing. And it bums me out because I know what those kids are going through. And I know that over a couple of years, they're probably not going to be racing BMX anymore because of that reason.
Yeah, well, I think it's like almost a function of opportunity where if you're a rich kid, your parents are probably not worried about sending you all over the country and going with you because it's comfortable and it's not a burden on the family. But when it is the family's finances and they want to see almost a return on their investment, they want to see you win the race, that's when it sucks to be the kid.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, and the last thing you want to hear from your parents is like them bitching at you not doing well, right? Or, oh, we're spending all this money or we're doing this and that. It's like, fuck, man, like just leave me alone. Let me just race my bike.
Yeah. So you've got all that pressure on you to do well. There's also some things going on at home. I think, around 13, 14, I'm not sure what year it is, but your family splits up and it's a weird situation where I think your mom gets control of the hotel, but you and your dad live in the hotel?
Yeah, so my parents got divorced when I was like 14, I believe. So my dad pretty much lost everything in the divorce, and pretty much the only thing he really wanted was one room in the hotel room to kind of figure out his whole situation, save enough money to maybe get an apartment or to buy a house, whatever the situation was. And my mom moved on. She found another guy, moved into a house with him. My dad was like, well, I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to be right next to your side as well, man. And, I had the option as a child to go with my mom to this new house, to this new life, to this new dude that, fuck, I didn't even know who he was,
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's so awkward. That's so weird. I'm not doing that. I decided to stay with my dad in the hotel room. And it was supposed to be like a 1 month thing, 2 months. The next thing you know, it was like 6 months. And after 3 years, living in a hotel room, I had to get out.
Oh, I can imagine. I mean, what are the crazy things you see in a place like that?
Well, my dad was a big drinker.
Okay.
So I'll be in the hotel room sleeping, school night, in bed by 8 o'clock at night, getting ready for the next morning for school. And my dad would like roll in super drunk, whatnot. And this is kind of a crazy story. I remember this like it was yesterday. I remember sleeping in the hotel room and I heard this big bang. I was like, what in the hell was that? And like the roof like almost collapsed. And my dad was so wasted, he drove the truck through the room.
Oh,
Yeah. There's these little beams, these little support beams, and he hit one and the roof caved in.
holy shit.
Yeah, he was blacked out behind the wheel. Yeah, I just remember as a child, I was crying. I was so like, oh my God, what the hell is going on? And I think that was like kind of the last straw as well for me. That I was like, I need to kind of get out of this place.
Man, it's like nothing in your life has been easy. And we'll talk about that later. But yeah, man, what a tough childhood. And it sounds like while you could still be killing it in the BMX racing world, you're pretty burnt out on it. And your mom's now overtaking you places. She's just like, fuck it. Nope, I'm not going anymore.
Yeah, and that's where my BMX career ended, man. It ended right there. It ended right when my parents got divorced. She moved on. She did her own thing. My dad was super depressed with the divorce. He drank himself heavily, man. That divorce did some very bad damage to him and changed his life, man. He would show up to the room drunk. He would leave the room drunk. He was drunk 24/7, man. It was quite depressing scene. And, I was 14, 15. I knew it was a big deal, but maybe like looking back now, I'm like, it's probably a lot bigger deal than it was. And I just knew that I just needed to like focus on what I enjoyed doing. And still at the same time, I still enjoyed riding bikes. Was it racing? No, but I found a new love of biking, and that was dirt jumping. And I ended up building some dirt jumps behind the hotel. And every day after school, I would go straight back to the hotel and I would just work on these jumps. And I just spent my whole time behind the hotel building these jumps and riding.
Do you lose all the bike hookups that you had, and are you at square one in the bike world again and just figuring out dirt jumping?
Yep, absolutely. So yeah, I lost all my connections on the BMX side of things as far as the racing. But I didn't even care, man. I honestly didn't even care about all that. I just wanted to ride. And did I think that I was going to have the same success on the dirt jump side of things on the BMX? No, I didn't. But I enjoyed it a lot more. And the reason why was it wasn't competitive. I went out, built some jumps on some vacant lots, rode by myself. There was no competitions. And it was literally just me wanting to learn tricks.
Did you take your BMX bike in the parks at all back then?
No, in the early days, we didn't have a skate park in Minden. We ended up getting one a few years later. But before the skate park came around, I would just go to these vacant lots, build some dirt jumps. I had a little piece of property to work with behind the hotel. It was like 12 feet wide by, I would say, 700 feet long, super narrow. And if you messed up, you get cut open by this barbed wire fence. Yeah, so nobody would want to ride back there because it was so narrow, and everyone was like, I'm going to get chewed up by the barbed wire fence. And I have the gnarliest scar in my right arm, and it's from that barbed wire fence.
The price you paid to come up was still visible on your arm?
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now, and it's still there. I have a massive scar. I was trying to learn 360s and carved off the lip too much and landed on the barbed wire fence and split me right open. And this is long before foam pits and all that, so that wasn't an option. And especially growing up in Minden, that wasn't even something I even thought of. But hey, I was so pumped on it because, it was a place that I was able to ride. I had water. I would fill up these little water buckets from the sink from the hotel. And bring them in the back and water the jumps. It was a perfect setup.
And are you just using your bike? I mean, while it's fun to you and it's all you know, are you using it to just escape the problems of life too? It's just like whenever you can, you get on your bike and everything else fades away?
Yeah. Still today, I use it for therapy. I think the happiest I'm ever is on a bike. And it's been like that since I was a child, and it's still the same today.
I mean, there's probably like a minute or two with Nicole that you probably feel pretty great too.
Yes, of course. But, like, that's a different type of love, right?
Yeah, totally. I'm just messing with you. Now it's time for me to take a sponsor break. And I love Stanley. They have been around for over 100 years, and they have always stood behind their products because they're the best. I'm not just saying that. I use the water bottles and pint glasses daily, and they really do keep things hotter and colder for longer than the competition. In my opinion, at least an hour longer. Stanley has supported the show for a while, and I want to keep it that way. So I'm asking for your help. What I want you to do is use my code with Stanley to save 30% on the best products on the market. What you need to do is head on over to stanley-pmi.com and go shopping. They have so many products over there, and hopefully I'll have one of everything at some point in my life. But you need to go shopping over there. You enter the code DRINKFAST, that's all one word, at checkout. You're going to get 30% off your Stanley stuff, and it helps the podcast as well. So thank you very much for that. My final sponsor is the 10 Barrel Brewery out of Bend, Oregon, another brand that I love. And I know I said it about Stanley, and I'm saying it about 10 Barrel, and both of those things are true. With 10 Barrel, they support so many different things in ski, snowboard, and bike that when I went to the store before they even sponsored the podcast, I would buy 10 Barrel just because of that. And then when they started sponsoring me, I realized exactly how much they actually do for action sports. They have an A-list team of athletes across ski, snowboard, and bike. They have a big money event series in their Hella Big Air events, and they give back money to the Surfrider Foundation and protect our winners. They do so much, and they have a beer for everyone. I find myself drinking a lot of Profuse Juice, a hazy IPA. Next time you're at the store, I encourage you to pick up a 6-pack of 10 Barrel and support the beer that supports the active mountain lifestyle more than anyone. The 10 Barrel Brewery. Those are my sponsors. Now let's jump back into the podcast. Around 14, 15, you meet one of the most influential people in your life, at least on a bike, and that's Cam Zink.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you and Cam connect?
So Cam grew up 15 miles away from me. He grew up in this little town, Carson City, and he went to Douglas High School. Cam was a year older than me, so I was never able to drive around, and Cam would always come down, borrow his mom's Lexus, and come pick me up, and we would go ride. So we would go and travel to Reno. We would go to all these little riding locations. At the time, Cam was riding a mountain bike, and I was on a BMX still. And yeah, we just kicked it, Basically, it was just Cam and I really doing the whole BMX/mountain bike dirt jump scene here in Northern Nevada. And we were pumped on it, like he had the same vision that I did. He enjoyed riding bikes just as much as I did. And we became best friends because of two wheels.
Is it pretty much you getting in the car with him, road tripping to different spots and just sessioning and progressing as much as possible?
Yep. We would do that every weekend. And sometimes even after school, he would come pick me up, or I would take the bus up to Carson, and then we would go and just ride.
Does he ever mess around on your BMX bike, or you ever ride his mountain bike?
At the time, he kind of jumped around a BMX once in a while. He was really good at street riding. Cam was really good at street riding, so he would always grind the craziest rails, biggest wall rides.
On a BMX bike?
Yeah, Cam was super good on a BMX bike on the street side of things.
Huh.
Yeah, I don't think a lot of people know that, but yeah, Cam was really good on the street side of things and skate park on the BMX side of things. And for me, I would never jump in the mountain bike. I just never had any interest. I was like, that thing's so big. Those wheels are massive. Like the suspension, that's too much work to flip that bike around, So
Yeah.
I never had any intentions of riding a mountain bike.
Okay. At this time, things start happening for Cam. He gets signed on to Santa Cruz. And while there really isn't a landscape of your career at this point, what does the landscape of your bike career look like? Are you just having fun and riding a bike, entering no contests, and finally happy again?
Exactly. No intentions of making it as a career, just having fun. But I was progressing a lot. I was learning so much new stuff. I was doing flips, tail whips, three whips. At age 15, I was progressing really quick on the BMX bike, but had no intentions of going back to the competitive side of things, because I just knew that I was going to just bring back some awful memories. And I was just riding around just for fun, man.
As you're doing this and riding for fun, if you're not going to be a pro biker at this point, the path that it looks like you're taking is a shitty one. It's the world of plumbing.
Yeah.
So you're maybe an apprentice, or I don't know what you're doing plumbing wise, but Cam asks you to go to Sea Otter with him. And that's your first big event where you jump on a mountain bike. Had you jumped on Cam's bike before? Or was it just you're going to Sea Otter and then he's like, hey, let's do this. You can do it.
Pretty much. Cam was like, hey, I have to go to Monterey for this bike festival thing. There's a dirt jump contest. It's one double. I think you should enter it. And I was like, man, what's this all about? He's like, it's just one jump. Let you borrow my mountain bike. Come out. It's going to be fun. I'm like, all right, man, sounds good. Let's go. And I'm trying to rewind a little bit.
Okay.
Man, it's crazy. This is 2004, I believe.
Yep.
So Cam and I drove together in Monterey. I remember he was all set up with Santa Cruz, and Santa Cruz put him up in a place to stay.
Okay.
Not the first night, but the last 3 nights, he had a place to stay. And the team manager at the time at Santa Cruz Bikes wasn't the nicest dude. And he was like, sorry, no friends can stay at this condo, which I get, I'm sure they just want team members only. And I ended up sleeping in my truck in the parking lot of the Sea Otter event, right there in front of the gates.
That's how you pay your dues, man.
Yeah. I was like, whatever. Cam actually kicked it the first night, which was pretty funny. Even though he had a place to stay, he kicked it the first night. And yeah, I just passed out right there in front of the gates of the Sea Otter event. And the next day was the dirt jump contest. I remember pulling up to the event. Cam's like, here you go, man. Go do your thing. And it was such a crappy jump. I did not feel comfortable spinning it. Didn't feel like doing anything. And then being on a mountain bike as well, I'm like, this is kind of weird as well. I'm like, I'm just going to do the things I know I can do regardless of what bike I'm on or what jump I'm on. So I did a flip, did a tail whip, and then I was like, man, this is going really good. And I was like, my third run, I'm going to try a flip whip. Try to flip whip, didn't land it, but it was the first time apparently that anyone tried to flip whip a mountain bike, and I got so much exposure from the flip whip, even though I didn't land it, but people were talking about the flip whip over anything else I did that weekend. I ended up third place, and I won enough money to get a hotel room that night. I was so pumped.
And yeah, that's one of those things where when you throw that trick and you don't land it, but people see it, that's like the change right there. Is people are like, holy shit, this is going to level up and everything's going to get harder. Now you look at the bike world and it's leveled up like 3 more times where you'd never even want to be a part of that competition, even in your prime, I would think, because of what people are spinning.
Yeah, I would hate to be the young buck we're now trying to get into slopestyle. What those guys are doing, it's on a whole different level, like you were saying. You know, like when I did the first 720 on a mountain bike, I never thought anybody was going to do that ever again, or throw a bar spin in there or tail whip. And next thing you know, we got Nikolai doing 1440s, and you're like, oh my goodness, like what in the world is going on? Like the level of slopestyle is so crazy. The game has changed a lot since 2004, but it changed for the better, and I'm stoked on where it's at today.
Okay, so that Sea Otter event was a big one for you, but that's not the big one for you.
No.
Cam invites you to go up to Whistler, and that's what you're going to save all your money from plumbing to go on that trip, and that's a life-changing trip for you. You're not a mountain biker by any means. You've been on a mountain bike at that point.
Right.
But Cam says, come on up here. And how's he able to even get you in this event? Because Crankworx is like a really big deal in the bike world. I think it's the first year of slopestyle, and you are nobody except for what you did at Sea Otter. How are you able to get in?
Well, in 2004, Crankworx was super chill to get in. I mean, I think all you had to do was like write like a little email saying, hey, I can do this trick. Hey, am I able to do this, this, and that? And you would pretty much got in. I think Cam wrote an email to one of the event organizers saying, hey, I have a buddy that's super good at BMX bikes. He's able to do a flip, tail whip. I think you guys should have him be a part of this event. And he got an email back. He's like, totally cool, but he has to do the qualifiers. And Cam's like, all right, that's not an issue. So Cam's like, hey, by the way, you're going to Crankworx. You can borrow my bike. I have another bike coming in, so you can spend some time with this bike. You can have it for a couple weeks before Crankworx and get used to it, because this is going to be a crazy event. I just remember I was like, all right, cool. All the tricks I can do on the BMX bike, I'm just going to learn on the mountain bike and just try to bring it over to the mountain bike side of things. And when I showed up to Crankworx, I thought it was going to be kind of the same situation like a Sea Otter, like one jump deal.
Yeah.
And then I show up to the venue, and it's like a full-on, like, massive snowboard hits on a slope. And then I'm like, what in the world am I doing here? Like, I have one brake. It's a hardtail. And there's, like, teeter-totters. There's, like, wood bridges, like, drops. I'm like, this is a whole different level of BMX. This doesn't even exist in BMX, you know?
Yeah.
At Sea Otter, at least I had one dirt jump. That's the same thing as far as anything else on a BMX bike. But going to Crankworx and then seeing this face with drops, dirt jumps, teeter-totters, quarter pipes, I was like, what in the world is going on, you know?
Yeah.
I was terrified. And I remember, like, practice, I was just, like, super squirrely, overshooting stuff because I didn't have a front brake. I didn't even know how the suspension worked. I was all over the place. I was just like, okay, I need to get my shit together because this is not going well. And then all of a sudden, something just kind of clicked. It was kind of brought me back to like the BMX competitive days, you know, like, okay, I just saved up my whole summer allowance to come out here, and you're riding like a fucking idiot, you know?
You got your mom yelling at you in your head?
Pretty much. I think I did. And I was like, time to step your shit up. And I was like, if you're here, you might as well try your best and roll the dice and see what happens. Next thing you know, something just clicked and qualifiers happened. I ended up winning qualifiers. And then I got an invite to the finals, which was the next day. And I ended up winning.
Yeah. So your second run is crazy. I think you flip up and then you whip off the big box. And do you know when you land that run that it's going to take the lead for the moment?
It's so hard to go back to that moment, but I remember my second run, I was stressed because I heard rumors that Timo was going to jump the whole scaffolding feature, the last feature.
Yep.
And I was like, no way, Timo's going to gap that whole thing. I'm like, then I better figure out what I'm going to do, because obviously I'm not going to send that whole thing, but maybe if I'm able to like incorporate 2 tricks on that feature, there might be a good chance that I can win. And I'm not sure if Timo dropped in before me or after me, but regardless, I knew he was going to do that. And I was like, okay, I'm going to try to backflip on and tail up off and see what happens. And I ended up backflipping on the last feature, kind of under rotated, got super squirrely, missed the takeoff to the drop, but I still wanted to tail a bit. And I managed to kick the tail up at the last minute and landed it and rode away and won the whole event.
Yep, you win the whole event, which is amazing. But I'm going to ask you a question that kind of pertains to your whole career at this point. So when you finish a run and you're in first place and they put you in the corral, cameras are on you so they can get your reaction when everybody else goes down the course to see if they can beat your score and knock you out of first place. When you're sitting there and there's a difference of $10,000 or so on the line, and I'm sure this is your first one, so this isn't the best one to talk about, but it's happened more in your career, I'm sure. But when you're sitting there and you're looking up, while you want to see everybody make it down healthy and land their runs, what are the thoughts going through a rider's head when you have that 20 minutes where you're just watching each run and hoping that your score holds up?
Yeah, that's almost sometimes scarier than actually doing your event, just watching others coming down. And even if you're in the hot seat, you're like, oh my goodness, hopefully my score holds up to win, you know? And obviously you want all the other competitors to go down and stomp their runs and be healthy, but at the same time, you want to win, right? And it's so nerve-wracking. And for me, it was more nervous, like being in that position and watching the other riders just kind of like chomp on your feet to kind of beat your score. It's a weird feeling, man. It's kind of hard to explain, but it's one of those things that you want the competitors to do their run, but at the same time, you don't want them to do a run that's going to be yours.
You just want them to stomp everything but wash out on that last landing and lose some points?
Pretty much. Slip a pedal or something. I mean, I guess at that time, it didn't really matter if you slipped pedals or not, but yeah, you just want to make sure that they got down healthy, but it wasn't a score that was going to beat yours.
Okay. And the funny thing about the whole Crankworx event is you don't even have a mountain bike. You don't have anything to show cameras. You have Cam Zink's bike. Cam is your sponsor. But this thing is game-changing for you. This opens up a whole new world where now you are a mountain biker and you are going to be able to compete in all these events. What sponsors happen directly after that Crankworx? Because I'm sure it's a media circus for you and everything blows up overnight. Like overnight success, that's what that was for you.
Yes and no. My name definitely got known in the mountain bike world, but it wasn't like I was signing contracts that next day, you know, like it took until Interbike to start signing those contracts, but it gave me a very good negotiation when I went to Interbike to sign these contracts, knowing the fact that I just won Crankworx, right? So right after Crankworx, it wasn't like I was a factory rider, you know. The next day, I ended up getting my own bike for sure. Santa Cruz gave me a mountain bike. I was so pumped, so excited about it. And I won $3,000 the first Crankworx. And it was enough money to get a flight to Marquette, Michigan to compete in the second slopestyle event of my career. I ended up getting third place and won $1,000 and made enough money with that $1,000 to get a flight to Maryland to compete in the Red Bull Bike Battle. And I ended up getting second place there. So I did 3 slopestyle events in 2004 and podium at all 3 events. And then Interbike rolls around and I was planning on signing with Santa Cruz Bikes. So I was so pumped. I was driving to Vegas and all my intentions was to sign with Santa Cruz Bikes. And then all of a sudden, this guy calls me out of nowhere. Big D calls me out of nowhere. Hey, bud, I heard you're going to sign with Santa Cruz Bikes. Don't do it. I can get you an offer, double the price with Kona Bikes. And I was like, who is this guy? You know, and if you don't know who Big D is, he's like the Don King of mountain biking.
Is that Derek?
Yeah.
Derek Westerlyn, he's been on the podcast. He's an amazing personality. And I might as well ask you right now, what's your best Derek Westerlyn story?
Oh, man. Maybe this one, what I'm about to tell you.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, so I'm driving up to Vegas, and I was so pumped because I was going to sign with Santa Cruz Bikes, and I get a phone call from Big D, Derek Westerlyn, and he was like, hey, man, I heard you're about to sign with Santa Cruz Bikes. Do not do that. I can get you double the pay with Kona Bikes. He's like, meet me at the Hard Rock Circle Bar tonight. I'm like, okay, well, I'm 17 years old. How the heck am I going to get into the bar? And I ended up getting in, and I was so like starstruck. There was Dave Mira, there was Ryan Nyquist, all these heavy hitters, and Big D was there. And next thing you know, he's like talking numbers to me, and I'm like, who are you? Like, do you work for Kona? Like, who are you? You know, he's like, nope, I do all the films for Kona bikes, blah, blah, blah. He's like, it's a badass brand. Just trust me, bud. And he gave me a shot. And then next thing you know, I went to the trade show the next morning, and he was right. The contract was there, and it was a lot more money than Santa Cruz Bikes was offering me. And they were going to give me a signature slopestyle bike and all this. And I was like, man, this would be ridiculous not to sign this.
I mean, it's pretty incredible that a year before, you're on a BMX bike practicing dirt jumps behind your hotel, and now you're being offered a signature bike in the mountain bike world. That's just like mind-blowing.
Super mind-blowing. Because like at the time, nobody had a signature pro model on the slopestyle world. And I was like, this is so crazy. Like, not only that I'm going to be able to like sign with this bitching company, I'm also going to be able to like design a slopestyle bike, and I'm going to get royalties off it. Like, this is crazy.
Yeah, totally insane. So that's really how your life changes through Crankworx, because it opens up a whole door of opportunities and sponsorship for you. And then in 2005, you finished with a bunch of big podiums at big events, but you also are in high school. So would you graduate in 2005?
Yeah, senior year was my 2005 I graduated.
And does anybody know what's going on in the bike world at high school? Do they realize that you are starting to become somebody, or is that two separate worlds?
Two separate worlds. Well, you know what? In 2004, junior year, when I won the first Crankworx, I was a junior in high school. And then when I won the second year Crankworx, my senior year in high school, I had a full factory ride with Kona bikes. I was making a decent amount of money, and I was traveling quite a bit, so I wasn't in school as much. And obviously the teachers knew exactly what I was doing, so the word got out, and they knew that this is what I was going to do, right? Like, even though I did graduate, and I graduated with pretty damn good grades for being gone for half the time, they just knew that this is what I was going to do. And I almost missed my graduation because I wanted to compete at the Adidas slopestyle event, and I was like, oh man, you only do this once in a lifetime. So I ended up opting out of the Adidas slopestyle contest and graduated, and I'm glad I did, looking back. But yeah, my teachers kind of had an idea, and yeah, I mean, everybody knew my age, so everybody knew I was still in high school.
You graduate high school, we move on to 2006, and things are on fire for you. That's when you start really, really traveling, because you've traveled, but this is when you're filming in Panama and Puerto Rico, Brazil, Scotland, Germany. Does life just become living out of a suitcase right after high school for you?
Yeah, it did. You know, I was so focused on contests and filming. Like, I used to love filming so much, and I would do seriously every single contest. And then, like, when I was not competing, then I was filming for Freeride Entertainment. I was fully pinned, so I was literally living in the suitcase and just bouncing around from hotel to hotel, from country to country.
And while contests really are a way to get paid and keep your sponsors happy, filming is the shit that lasts forever and also keep your sponsors happy. And it's really where you can showcase your skills and style, and it's kind of on your own time or on the whole crew's time. But being as a lot of people look at you as a slopestyle guy, is this where you're going to earn respect from the mountain bikers, as like you being a real mountain biker? It's through videos?
You know, yes and no. Like you were saying, like, good thing about filming is that you can do exactly what you want. You know, sometimes when you compete at a contest, you know what the judges are looking for, so you're kind of like a robot and you're just focusing on those tricks. But with filming, it's an open canvas and you're able to do whatever you want. And I enjoyed that so much because I was able to push my riding as well, right? Like with the contest, like you're like, okay, well, I really want to do this trick, but the odds of me landing this is not very good. And obviously you don't want to do that at a contest. And with filming, you have as many tries as you want to do it, you know? And that's what I loved about filming. And I think that's why majority of my film segments, you would see me do all these tricks that you would never see me do in a slopestyle event, just knowing the fact that, you know, I wasn't consistent of doing them.
Were they tricks so that you might throw if you landed your first run and then you wanted to just totally blow people out of the water?
Yeah, exactly. Like, it was one of those things you don't do it in the first run, knowing the fact that maybe you landed 2 out of 10 or something. But yeah, if you nail your first run, I would always try to do something in my second run that would up the level to hopefully win or to up my own score.
Okay. You know, in terms of filming, your standout part is New World Disorder 7, I think. You close that movie out, which is a goal for anybody to have the final part in a movie. But the highlight is you landing the first ever 7 on a mountain bike. Without that trick, do you think you would still close the movie out?
Good question. Probably not. That was a big deal, man, in the mountain bike world. Like no one's ever 720 a mountain bike. There were so many people trying them, but it was one of those things you're like, is this even possible? Like, is a big mountain bike like this able to do 2 rotations? And it was kind of cool because at the time, this is long before social media or YouTube, so nobody knew that I landed to the 720 until they watched the film 6 months later.
Yeah.
That's the crazy part about those days is that you can keep secrets, right? Like I remember stomping the 7. I was so pumped. I did not tell a single human being because, last thing you want to do is be the first person to do the 720 or whatever. And then someone hears about it and does the 720 and then puts out the footage before you do.
Yeah.
It's the last thing you want. And it was just so cool because I remember in the Vegas premiere at the Palms, I knew I had the enter because Big D told me. And I was just like, oh, it's going to be crazy when everyone sees that I landed a 720. And I remember being there at the Palms. I was a little boozed out for sure. And when everybody saw me do the 720 on the film, it was like winning Crankworx again. It was crazy. It's just like the crowd got so insane. It was a huge moment, man. It was really cool.
Another thing that's amazing is Rampage. It's one of those events where you can really prove yourself as not just a dude that can jump a bike, that can ride a line from top to bottom. I think 2008 is your first Rampage. And what does that event mean to you at the time?
Oh, man, at the time, it was one of those things that I was like, you know what? I need to branch out. I'm kind of getting burnt out on slope style. I want to see if I'm able to get in this whole big mountain side of things. Zink was super into it. I was riding the downhill bike quite a bit at home. I thought, it would be one of those things that I should probably add into my resume. Hey, I compete at the Red Bull Rampage, like one of the most prestigious mountain bike events of all time. And at the time, it was just, I wanted to make the finals. I wanted to walk away healthy. And I believe the first year of me entering the Red Bull Rampage event, I ended up 12th. I made the finals. I'm not sure exactly what position I ended up getting, but okay. I do remember making the finals.
Is it something where you spend a shitload of time in Utah preparing for an event like that? Because I'm sure the terrain's not something that you're used to.
Yeah, Rampage is one of those events that you go out like a week, 2 weeks prior, and you kind of go scope your own lines. You go and see exactly what you really want to do on that bike. Like you have all the ability to push yourself to the most extreme, or you can take the little easy route. Like there are some easy routes down the Rampage line, believe it or not. That's what's so cool about that event. It's basically it's what you decide that what you want to do.
And every year that you go, is it just as stressful or does it get a little bit easier as time goes on?
Stressful. Rampage is always stressful. Like whether it's from weather, wind, or not knowing if you're going to be able to stomp your line or not. It's a scary event, man. That's why it only happens once a year.
Yeah, it's one of those events that even the spectators are scared watching, I feel like, but not like the athletes for sure. We're going to pick up on Rampage a little bit later, but at this time, you should be crushing it financially. You're probably 21, 22. I think you're able to buy a home. And in the bike world, when you buy a house, it's usually a compound. What was your setup like?
Before I bought my first house, I ended up buying 30 acres in Minden, my hometown. I didn't want to leave. I didn't want to move to Santa Cruz. I was like, I'm going to stick around. But if I do so, I knew that I had to get my own facility because there was no jumps, there was no like woodwards, there's nothing there for us. So I ended up buying 30 acres right below Job's Peak Mountain with a river flowing right down the center of the property, and I ended up building my own dirt chops. It was amazing.
You build a house on it as well?
No, I ended up not building a house on it, but I ended up buying a house in Reno. So I was living in Reno, and then I was commuting down to Minden to go ride.
Okay. Is that a place where you bring all your friends and it's just like, let's have fun, and you have a tractor and all that shit that you need, or a Caterpillar?
Yes and no. At the time, I was pretty competitive. Going back to the BMX racing days, I think it kind of attached to me once again. And I didn't really allow too many people to ride my facility, man. Looking back is a bit silly, but at the time, I just wanted to win every event. And I had that pressure of the sponsors and all the obligations to do well. And It was one of those things that I would actually just go out there and ride by myself.
And who are the sponsors at that point? Because you've got Kona. Who else do you have?
Kona Bikes, Red Bull, Raceface, Giro, Skull Candy, and I think that's about it at the time.
So you're killing it. Those are all great brands to be associated with. What other toys did you buy over the years?
Whew. I mean, I didn't really
Do you get the big truck?
in 2008, I think, I won the Red Bull District Ride. I ended up winning a truck, and I ended up selling that truck in Germany. And with the money I got from that truck, I ended up buying a Cadillac down here at the dealership. So I don't know if I would consider that buying a toy. I like saying I won it because I basically traded a truck for another truck.
Yeah.
And then I bought a boat, but that's about it, man. I didn't go crazy. I wasn't making rock star money, that's for sure. And I knew that this could only last for so long, so I would just try to stack as much as I can and actually invest in other real estate projects and the stock market. Like, yeah, kind of weird. Like, I wasn't your typical kid buying a bunch of toys and stuff. I was actually quite opposite.
Well, I mean, it makes sense. You're a kid who grew up in a hotel, and every dollar is probably very important to you. And once you have your house and your land, those are what you need to have a normal life that you didn't have growing up. And then everything else you can save so you don't ever lose that shit.
Exactly. Like, I see a lot of people buying Rolexes, sports cars.
Who's bought a Rolex?
Who?
Yeah.
Man, a lot of my moto guys, like Mike Mason. So I grew up in Minden, and Minden was a huge place for the FMX scene. It was such a powerful scene with Mason, Dustin Miller, Drake McGilroy, all those dudes. And I remember Mason like roll in with like a brand new Rolex watch, and I was like, man, that's kind of cool, but is it cool, you know?
Yeah, really.
And the way I looked at it with my contracts, I always thought it was only going to last for a year. So like every year my contracts were up. I'm like, okay, this is probably the last year I'm getting paid to ride bikes. So I always kind of had that mentality that at the end of the year, don't expect that this is going to continue on. So I would always save my money and try and invest to make more money outside of mountain biking.
And if you're an athlete out there and you're signing a single year deal, that is not in your best interest, because if you can get a brand to pony up 3-4 years for you, they're invested in you and they're going to put money behind you to make your career blow up even more. But if you're just on a 1-year deal, it's like every year they can cut it for you. And it's stressful for you being the athlete, having to think every year around December, I wonder if they're going to sign me again.
Yeah, and it's getting tough. I feel like a lot of these companies are not doing those 3 to 4 or 5 year deals anymore. Majority of the deals are 1 to 2 years, and it's stressful.
Yeah, man, I can't imagine having to prove yourself every 2 years just to be able to get what you deserve.
Exactly. And like I said, every year my contract was up. I'm like, okay, I'm probably going to get cut or a big pay cut. So let's not be ridiculous spending this money.
Okay. I don't know what year it is, but New World Disorder 10, I think that's the last movie and you're done filming with Freeride Entertainment. Do you go into the next season without a project to work on?
Yeah, so after NWD 10 was over, basically my filming days were over as well. I was so loyal to Freeride Entertainment that I never filmed with any other film company. And essentially when they ended up full on, was done making films, I was kind of lost. Like there was no other companies that I had relationships with to go film with. So, yeah, filming was done with me as well.
But, you know, that happened. I mean, I can't say that happened with a lot of people, but there was a big shift in media where the yearly movie kind of lost a lot of importance and the personal project came up and became a big thing. And a lot of athletes had personal projects. You had one as well. You got Red Bull and Tiva to back it. You're going to do the first double backflip on natural terrain on a mountain bike. And is that a tough thing to pitch to the brands, or are they all about it right away?
It was a bit of a pitch for sure, but that wording's so weird, like funny, like first double backflip natural terrain. Like I never once said I was going to be the first person to do the natural double backflip. All I wanted to do was to do the double backflip out in the Utah terrain, right? And I'm so pumped that it happened. I'm so stoked I was able to do the double flip, but it kind of like backfired on me because Teva was such a corporate brand that they wanted to incorporate the first. So the PR and their marketing guys over there are like, hey, well, we're going to label this the first double backflip natural terrain ever. And I'm like, whatever, man, you guys do you. You know, at the time, you don't want to argue with your sponsors and tell them how to send out these press releases.
Yep.
I was blessed that this project happened, but I think the core mountain bikers, like, maybe wasn't the biggest fan of it. But at the time, I just wanted to do a double backflip in the Utah terrain. That's what I wanted to do. And I wasn't in charge of the wording. I wasn't in charge of the press release. And for Teva to go out there and say the first natural terrain double backflip was a bit silly and clickbait.
Was it the first in natural terrain?
I mean, it was the first double flip in the Utah terrain. Natural terrain, I don't know, like obviously I scoped the lip and stacked a bunch of rocks to be able to do that double flip. It wasn't like a perfect natural lip that I didn't have to like touch,
Yeah, totally. And at the end of the day, I can see where some of the purists might not be stoked on it because it's kind of a circus trick of like, hey, let's see if he can land it. And you did. And while that should be a big deal in terms of PR and press and to keep your sponsors happy, I don't think it does because in 2013, it seems like everyone drops you.
It did, yeah, exactly. You're absolutely right, man. What a fucked up year that was. Yeah, so after the double flip, I thought Teva, Red Bull, these companies were super pumped on me. And then I ended up shattering my wrist. And I missed like majority of the slopestyle contest. And exactly what you said, I pretty much got dropped by every single brand.
And what does that do to you? Like, does it hurt your self-esteem, self-worth, all that shit? Because you define yourself as a pro mountain biker, and then all these guys are dropping off and not supporting you. Does it mess with your head?
Dude, totally. I mean, not only just your head, but like the people around you as well. Like, I was such an awful human being. Like, my fiance was not pumped on me. Like, I was so devastated. Like, here I am. I have a big mortgage. I have this property I have to pay for, and all these fuckers just dropped me,
Yeah.
Like, it's pretty depressing, man. Like, I've done so well, and I did so well. I felt like representing these brands, and then when all of a sudden you just get cut, you're lost, you're confused, you want to know why, and they don't have the answers. For me, in my case, I kind of know why. I was hurt, one off. Like, I shattered my wrist, and I wasn't able to compete in majority of the slopestyle events. But at the same time, I wasn't really winning all the slopestyle events anymore. I wasn't doing that well. And to be honest with you, I was burnt out. It felt like I was back in the BMX racing days, like doing the same shit over and over every weekend. And felt like I had that same pressure as I did with my mom with these sponsors. So I was burnt out.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at it on paper too, you aren't filming any more projects because New World Disorder is done. Contest-wise, you're not going to win them anymore based on the trick progression. That's a fact of life. It's just kind of gotten to that point. You set the bar, and the bar keeps getting raised, and you can't raise with it all the time. So you've lost all your sponsors. You're not filming projects, but you are able to get sponsors again. How does that all work out?
I kind of like reinvented myself. I ended up getting into the drone business. My old roommate, Trent Palmer, he started Copter Kids, and he got me into the drone side of things, and we started shooting all these videos with drones. At the time, not too many people were doing that, and I would pitch these projects to these companies. Hey, by the way, I have all my film equipment, I own a drone, I can create all this content for you guys. Would you guys be willing to partner up with me? And I got Scott on board, and majority of these other brands that I'm representing still today because of that reason.
We might as well shout out who you're representing today.
Yeah, so today, my program, I'm on Scott Bikes, IXS, Spank Clothing, X Fusion, Schwabe Tires, and Ride Concepts. Well, Ride Concepts, it's not a sponsorship. I'm involved with the brand.
You're like the team manager over there, right?
I'm in charge of all global athletes, and I'm an investor as well over there.
So owner, employee, you're desk jockeying it, sending a lot of emails and telling people what to do. That's got to be a different thing for you, but I'm sure it's not that hard.
That's a whole different conversation.
Yeah. All right, well, we'll keep to this conversation. And the next thing I'm going to talk about really sucks. 11 years after your life-altering win at Crankworx that created a career for you, you go to Rampage again. You're lined sick, you flip the canyon gap like it was something you did all the time, and then on the big drop in your line, you get off track a little bit, you get bucked on your bike, you're able to hold on, your pedal gets grabbed by some branches, you're thrown over a drop, and just like that, life changes again.
It did. Yeah, 2015, man, was, what a fucked up year that was.
Yeah.
What a fucked up year 2015 was, man. Where do I even start? Rampage. that year, I was like, man, this is the year that I'm finally going to be able to step on that box. I have such a unique line. I have tricks from top to bottom. This is the year. If any year that Paul Bass is going to be on the podium at Rampage, this is the fucking year.
Yeah.
And I had that confidence, man. I did. And I was so confident. I was so comfortable with my line. And the weird thing was, win or lose, I knew that was going to be my last year competing at Rampage.
Okay.
I did. But going back to that event, before dropping in, like I was just ready, man. I was just ready to showcase what I was able to do on this line, step on that box, and be done with it. And everything started out so perfect, too good, actually. The biggest worry I had in my whole mind was flipping that top canyon.
Yeah.
And when I was able to do that, I did it so perfect and then lined up right after that to a 270 off a hip. And everything was going so smoothly. And then I hit the big bottom drop, overshot it, got off course maybe a foot or two, and my pedal caught a branch and flipped me over the handlebars and landed on my back. And I was so pissed because it's like, fuck, I have to go and do my second run again. And when I tried to get up, I couldn't get up because I had no movement or feeling from the waist down. Right then I freaked out and I knew I was in big trouble.
Yeah, it's so scary. In the back of your head, something can go wrong at any time, but you never think of this. This is the one thing you don't think that's going to happen to you. It can happen to other people. And they get you in a helicopter, get you out of there. You go to the hospital and they tell you, I don't know how they tell you that there's a solid chance that you'll never walk again. I think they tell your girlfriend, Nicole, that you'll never walk again. But how do they break the news to you?
I mean, they never really gave me a clear answer. I mean, all they said was, hey, we're going to have to cut you open. It's going to be a 10.5-hour surgery. There might be a good chance when you wake up that you might be able to regain some movement. I'm like, okay, cool, And the way they were explaining was you burst fractured your T12 vertebrae and the bone fragments went into your spinal cord, but it didn't cut it completely. So we're going to go in there, we're going to stabilize the spine, and we're going to take all the bone fragments out of your spinal cord, and hopefully you'll be able to regain movement and sensation after this operation.
Do they give you any kind of percentages? Because I would think you would want to know something. Like, hey, I know there's not a lot of certainty of what is going to happen to me, but give me a percentage. Like, is there a 5% chance I'll walk? Do they give you anything like that, or you just go into it without really knowledge? Just hope.
Well, that's a scary thing about spinal cord injuries is even the neurosurgeons and the doctors have no idea.
Yeah.
The spinal cord is such a complicated body part, and man, like every spinal cord injury is so different. And that's what's so scary about this injury is that all the outcomes, like you can have the same burst fractured T12 vertebrae and the outcome will be totally different. And they had no idea. Like they had a conversation with my fiance, and I know the percentage wasn't very promising.
Yeah.
But they never told me because I think truly they had no idea.
Okay. And that would be a tough thing to handle if they gave you a very low percentage. I don't think it would do anything positive for you.
Right. It's not like they were saying, hey, Paul, by the way, we're going to stabilize you and you're never going to walk again. Like they don't do that. They also don't say that you're going to be totally fine as well because they don't know.
Well, I interviewed John Cardiel, who's a badass skateboarder, and he's a biker now as well. He's on Chrome's program for like a fixie, but he's a badass all around. He severed his spine in Australia at some skate trip, and they told him his spine was severed and he would never walk again in the hospital. And he said he stared at his toe for 3 months and finally got it to move. And now he rides a bike, and he's like, I won't say he's good because he's probably got a lot of things that I don't know about, but he's walking and riding a bike. And yeah, like you never know. And I guess those doctors telling him that he wasn't going to walk, he was like, fuck you. Don't tell me that. I'm going to fucking walk. You don't know me.
Is he skateboarding again too?
He has. I mean, he's never skateboarded on the level that he did skate before, but I've seen him drop in. Yeah.
Well, I mean, if he's able to skateboard, that's fucking insane. Like, I used to skateboard all the time. I miss that sport so much. That's impressive that he's able to do that.
Yeah, he's doing it, man. It's a really great story, just like yours. With your story, though, the interesting thing is that you documented everything about this. People can watch it on HBO. It's called Any One of Us. And it's a really heavy movie, which I said earlier. But the whole point of documenting this, when you're in the hospital, what makes you think that, hey, I'm going to video every shitty aspect of this whole thing and make a movie about it? Or is it just something that you have a camera and you're like, this is going to occupy my time and I'll just do this?
I had no intentions of ever making a film about this. The whole way this all came about was literally a week before my injury, I bought this camera. And I didn't have the opportunity to kind of like learn how to operate it or anything. So when I was in the hospital, knowing the fact I was going to be there for 3 months, I was like, this is no better time to learn how to operate this camera. So I started shooting my day-to-day struggles for fun, just learn how to operate the camera. I just wanted to shoot my day-to-day struggles. And basically it was just something to do to kill time and to get my mind off of other things. So I wanted to just learn how to operate this camera. So I started shooting my day-to-day struggles. And then, every day I would do research. I would try to figure out what to do in this situation with a spinal cord injury. And then come to find out there was no information. There's no book or movie what to do in spinal cord injuries or what to expect, and I was so uneducated with this injury that I knew that I was not the only person in the world that was in this situation. So I was like, man, I think this could be something very powerful. Maybe I'll make like a little YouTube video or something about spinal cord injuries.
And then Red Bull steps up after a while and it becomes a much bigger project?
Yes. So Aaron Lutzy, he's the sports marketing guy at Red Bull. He would come and visit me at the hospital and he would show up and I'm filming stuff. I'm filming my recovery. I'm filming just my day-to-day stuff just to kill time. And Lutzy's like, man, what are you doing with all this footage? I'm like, I don't know, man. I might make a little YouTube video or something. I don't know. Like, no plans, man. Right now, it's just to kill time. And then I got home 3 months later from the hospital, and I'm still documenting myself. And Lutzy came up. He's like, dude, are you still shooting stuff? I'm like, yeah, man. He's like, how do you feel if we come on board and help you out and tell the story? I'm like, I'm all for it.
And that's amazing because Red Bull's not a sponsor at this point, right?
No, but I've always had a good relationship with Red Bull, regardless if I wasn't a branded athlete or not. Like, I always was in good terms with the guys, especially with the media house side of things.
Okay.
Yeah, I wasn't a branded Red Bull athlete. I didn't have a big logo on my head, but I still had a great relationship with the brand and still kept in touch with everybody over there.
Cool. When you're in the hospital and with this footage, everyone says that they're going to fight regardless of what the doctors say. They're going to do whatever they can to make themselves walk. There's a point where you say in the movie that reality is set in. I don't know if you say it in these words, but it seems like you're accepting reality set in and you're not going to walk again or be on your bike. And this is early on. And are you just in a shitty headspace early on, and eventually when you get to Craig, that totally changes?
I mean...
And it's so easy for me to say, man, you were paralyzed. I'm sure you were in a shitty headspace. I'm saying it like insensitively.
Yeah, I mean, fuck, man. When you're living your worst nightmare and you can't move anything from the waist down and you're all drugged up on pills, like, you're in a bad space,
Yeah.
And I truly, at one point, thought that this was it, Like, I didn't have any guidance. I didn't have a film to watch. I didn't have any motivation, really. It was basically just me, like, learning this whole new lifestyle. And at one moment, I thought that was it. And, I was also in a small little hospital in St. George. There wasn't really much therapy equipment. There really wasn't much people there with other spinal cord injuries. So you didn't know what to expect.
Gotcha. And then when you go to Craig, which is like the leading hospital in spinal injuries in the country, at least from what I hear, you go there, and does your mental state totally change when you go there and you're around other people who are fighting to walk?
Yeah, it gave me a little bit of motivation for sure. I would roll in and I would see others fighting for their lives, man, to walk again. And the motivation, seeing others work just as hard as you, like, is very humbling. Then you see people in there that were 6 to 8 months, 1 year into this injury, and they're walking with a walker. And you're like, this is awesome. This gives me hopes. Hopefully in 6 months, I'm like that guy over there. So you'd work every day. And like you were saying, Craig facility is by far the best facility here in the U.S. as far as spinal cord injuries or TBIs. And I was very blessed to be able to go there. And I spent, I think, 2.5 months there.
And while you're there, your girlfriend's with you a lot of the time. She's your fiance now, Nicole. She really is a saint. We're not going to talk about her much at all, but she's amazing. But there's a part in the movie where she has to head back to work, and you're going to be at Craig alone. And I would ask how scary that could be, being in the situation finally by yourself. but I'm not, because the night before she's leaving, you ask her on camera to tell everyone what happened last night, and she wouldn't. What were you alluding to?
Oh, you dirty dog.
It's a question I think everybody is curious about when you have those kind of injuries. It sounds like you were able to do it again?
Yeah, it was crazy. Like, a lot of people don't know this, but when you sustain a spinal cord injury, you lose control of your bladder and bowels. And that was one of the hardest part about this injury was self-cathing yourself every 3 hours of the day.
That was so hard to watch in the movie, but it was so real you had to show it.
It was so real, so raw. I was so surprised that I had to do that. Like, I had no idea that went into a spinal cord injury. You know, when I got the self-catheter taken out of me, I was like, okay, this is sweet. I can pee on my own. No. Now you have to stick this catheter stick up your pee hole to be able to pee now.
Ugh.
And I was so lost. I was like, what? People have to do this? People that are paralyzed, they have to do this? I had no idea. I was so fucking clueless with that. That's why I wanted to document that, because I felt like it was very important. And like I said, I'm here to help others and educate people with this injury. And I could have took that scene out. You know, I came out as an executive producer. I could have took that scene out, but it would have been the fakest shit if I did. Like, I'm so glad that I kept that scene in there just because people need to know what goes into a spinal cord injury. And regardless, that was a very embarrassing moment for me. Like, I still need to tell that story.
Yeah. And I think probably the feel-good part of that movie, if there is any feel-good part, is when you take your first piss. I mean, just to see the joy on your face and hear it in your voice when you call Nicole and tell her. I mean, I'm almost tearing up now just thinking about you taking a piss, which is super weird because I don't really think about others taking pisses very often. But I mean, is that the biggest milestone of everything, is being able to do that?
Absolutely. Hands down, man. Hands down. Even if I wasn't never going to be able to walk again or ride a bike again, as long as I was able to pee on my own again, I would have been happy on my outcome.
Does it impact the way you poop too? Can you poop on your own?
Now I can, but at the time, no.
Okay. Yeah, because I have no idea.
No.
Does that come back around the same time as peeing does?
No, that came back a little bit later. The legal team at Red Bull, I didn't think they wanted to show all the dirtiness of the spinal cord injury, what goes into it. But yeah, so I got my bladder back before I got my bowels, and my bowels didn't come back for probably another year afterwards.
And was that the same thing, like a day of joy when you pooped the first time yourself?
Pretty much. Not as enjoyable, believe it or not, because I had feeling. So to stick that catheter stick up my dick was not pleasant. Like, I had feeling, like a lot of people that are paralyzed, like, they don't have feeling, so they can't feel it. So it's not as painful. But for me, I have great sensation. So it was painful, man. It was not fun to do that.
Yeah, I can't imagine.
And with the bowels, same situation, man. Like, you would have to go and manually do that. It was a fucked up situation, man. Spinal cord injuries is one of the most fucked up injuries that any human being can ever face. It's straight torture, and I hope one day there is that cure, and I hope that this film is helping others that are living in the situation. And I'm involved with the spinal cord injury world for the rest of my life. It's so crazy now that when I look at my DMs or if I look at my messages, I would say 98% of it are from other spinal cord injury people.
And just looking for inspiration.
Just guidance, what to do, And it's so funny because I used to get flooded with messages like, how do you get sponsored by Red Bull? How do you do this bike trick? How do I get sponsored? Like, now it's not even a conversation that people come and ask me about. It's all about spinal cord injuries.
Yeah. It's cool to be able to have that influence on people and to still have an influence on people. You eventually leave Craig Hospital. You wanted to walk out of there, but that doesn't happen. And they say that within 2 years or so is when you'll see the gains of what's going to happen, and eventually there'll be a plateau and it'll stop. But for you, when you leave the hospital, it sounds like the main problem for you is that your glutes won't fire. And while you could stand up, you have no balance whatsoever because those are such important muscles. But then a buddy suggests a stem cell treatment for you. And he said, that's the way that you should go, and it could make a big difference for you. And you go with the most controversial treatment on the planet. It's stem cells from aborted fetuses. And if I was in your shoes, I'd probably do the exact same thing. But you have to go to Mexico to get this shit done. What is the thought process? Do you even think I'm going to an unregulated place in Mexico? And is it all just say, I'm going to walk again and nothing else matters?
Yeah, I was so fucking nervous with that situation. But like here you are sustaining a spinal cord injury, you have no movement, or at the time I showed a lot of gains, but obviously I wasn't at the spot that I wanted to be at. And one of the most asked questions when you sustain a spinal cord injury is like, oh, you got to go get stem cells. Have you tried stem cells? If you get stem cells, you can go walk. Go get stem cells. You'll be able to walk.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, if I don't try stem cells, like this question is going to get brought up to me every fucking day. And I'm like, maybe it will help, but maybe it won't. But if I never try, I'm always going to think about these fucking stem cells, right?
Yeah.
So I chatted with a buddy. He went down to Mexico. He got this stem cell treatment, like you were saying, by aborted fetuses. And he was like, man, I think you should do this. It kind of helped me with my sensation. Go do it. So next thing you know, I booked a flight to Tijuana, Mexico, and got this procedure done.
Tijuana sounds like a perfect place to get a very important procedure.
Well, here's the deal. The facility in Tijuana, everybody that worked at that facility lived in LA.
Okay. And they just commuted?
Yeah, but they can't do this treatment here in the States.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
It's not regulated by the FDA, so they had to move their operations over across the border to Tijuana. So that wasn't too sketchy. It wasn't like I was walking in trying to speak Spanish to everybody. Like I said, everybody that worked at that facility lived in LA. But yeah, it was a very expensive treatment, and the outcome was not what I was looking for. I was hoping that I was going to be able to move my feet, my toes. I thought my glutes were going to fire back up, and unfortunately, none of that happened.
Did you get anything out of it other than being able to check that off the list of you don't have to think about what if?
Nothing came out of it.
Well, you got to try, man.
I know.
It is what it is, and that sucks. But one thing I want to know is life-altering injuries can change a person. From what I found, it's for the better. While obviously your situation totally sucks, I mean, it's getting a lot better. I don't want to say it totally sucks, but compared to being able to walk, it's not as cool as it should be. But did the process of getting to where you are now make you a better person compared to the dude who was 21 years old and winning everything?
Absolutely. This injury humbled me in so many different ways. I feel like I'm a way better person. I feel like I enjoy the little things so much more. Like taking a piss, like every time I take a piss, I do it with a smile. And I'm not fucking kidding when I say that. Every time I pee, I'm smiling. And it's one of those things I'm like, man, who would ever thought that would bring me so much joy to my life? And I appreciate these little things in life that I used to take for granted so much.
That's amazing. And are you a nicer person as well?
I think so. You know, I'm not competing. I'm not trying to be the best anymore. Like, I'm happy where I'm at. I think if you ask my fiance that question, I think she would say the same. I'm a happier person for sure, and I'm a nicer guy.
Nice. Well, it's unfortunate that it takes a life-altering injury to make you a nicer guy, but that's life sometimes. And there's a lot I miss in the interview. I mean, I want to know how much everything cost, how the injury changed Rampage, going back to Rampage, if you ever hated biking because of the injury, killing it lately on your e-bike, but we're not going to talk about all those things. We're going to go into a segment that I call inappropriate questions. I get someone that you know to ask you 3 questions, and they can be anything. This week, I went to the founder of the High Fives Foundation, Roy Tuscany. He's a great friend of mine. I love Roy, and I should have brought up the High Fives in the podcast a little bit more, but I didn't, but at least we're talking about him now. And are you ready for Roy's inappropriate questions?
Oh, man. Fire them off.
All right. Question number 1 actually comes from a close friend. His name is Landon McGully. He wants to ask, Paul, did you get laid after you won Crankworx in 2004?
No, I didn't. I think I was too drunk.
Speaking of being too drunk, what did your partying look like on the road when you were traveling? You had the world at your fingertips, money. Everybody wanted to show you a good time. Were you going out and sending it at night as well?
Only after the events. I was super professional before the finals, right? Like practice, qualifying, I would be in the bed, sleeping before 9 o'clock. But after the finals, we would definitely celebrate. And yeah, I would have a few adult beverages for sure.
Okay. We will go with question number 2 from Roy.
All right. Question number 2. And if you don't know this, Paul, I sourced 2 of these 3 questions. Question number 2 comes from the one, the mighty, Cam Zink. Paul, what is SPC?
Oh, man. SPC, that's a funny one. SPC stands for Small Penis Club. Oh, man. Back in high school, these girls were always like, would give us shit. Oh, like, I heard a rumor that you have a small penis or Cam has a small penis, all this. I'm like, fuck, we should just start a club called SPC, Small Penis Club.
So you and Cam are in a club called SPC?
No, I don't know. I'm just saying, like, girls back in high school and like, oh, I heard he has a small dick. And obviously somebody said that about me. So I was like, fuck it. I'm going to start a club called SPC.
Nice. Well, you owned it.
I owned it, man. I'm not afraid.
All right. We will go with Roy's final and best inappropriate question.
All right. This comes from me. After catheterizing yourself, were you able to blow bigger loads?
Now, that's something everybody wants to do, is blow an increased load, maybe 3-4 ounces. Roy is thinking that catheterizing yourself maybe would increase the diameter of the hole, which would increase the amount of ejaculation that could come out. Did that happen?
Man, there's a lot of penis questions here, hey?
Hey, it's a great podcast.
Same, and I'm blessed to be able to do it.
Fair enough. That is pretty much the podcast. And looking at your career, I mean, you had all this natural talent on a bike. And for you, everything should have been easy, but they weren't. It's like you could have been a world-class racer with Olympic gold, but your mom fucked that up. Yep. And then when it looks like you were going to be a plumber, you had overnight success, and then things got easy for a while. And then when things should be going strong, you lose all your sponsors, then get new ones, and then wreck yourself, and that career is over. But through all of the bad, it's like you became a better person. Your life's going to have a lot more meaning for others, and you're an inspiration that can deliver to people. And while that's not what you planned on life, it's still pretty fucking cool what you've been able to do, man. And I thank you for your time.
Well, thanks, Mike. And to add on to that, out of all the things you just said, I'm way happier today than I've ever been in my whole life. Too blessed to be stressed, buddy. I'm happy. I'm good.
So that was time with Paul Bass, and holy shit, it's amazing that Paul is where he is today. Because from his childhood on, things have always been a roller coaster for Paul. He's had so many moments in life that are heavy, some that would derail most people. His parents split up, but I guess that happens to everyone. But Paul had to see his dad deal with alcohol to the point where he drove a car through their home/hotel room. And then it sounds like his mom pretty much quit on him back then. But somehow, the stars aligned, and Paul's hard work on his bike at home created overnight success in the bike world. That success continued until his injury, and then life starts all over again, only completely different than before. Such a scary story for any athlete at Paul's level. But everyone knows there is risk, and Paul is an example of what can happen when things don't work out. But look at him. He's back on his bike, back in the industry, and who knows what he will conquer next. That's the podcast for this week. I want to thank you for listening, ask you to review me on whatever platform you listen to me on, and support my amazing sponsors, the 10 Barrel Brewery and Stanley. Have a great week, everyone.